This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. Juan?
Well, today marks the 25th anniversary of one of the worst industrial disasters of the 20th century. Shortly after midnight on December 3rd, 1984, in the city of Bhopal, India, tons of lethal gases leaked from a pesticide factory run by the U.S. company Union Carbide. Clouds of suffocating gases blanketed the city. Residents awoke with throats burning and tears streaming. The gases produced so much fluid in people's lungs that many drowned in their own body fluids. Between 8,000 to 10,000 people lost their lives within days. Thousands more died in the following years. Over 150,000 are still suffering chronic and debilitating illnesses. A new report released this week by the Bhopal Medical Appeal and a local clinic has found that there are still high levels of toxic chemicals in the drinking water supply in 15 communities near the old plant. Last week, Indian authorities decided against reopening the plant. They had announced they would open the factory to prove it no longer poses a threat to public safety, but reversed the decision in the face of protests.
In August, an Indian court reissued an arrest warrant for the former CEO of Union Carbide, Warren Anderson. The court urged the Indian government to seek his extradition from the United States. In 2001, Union Carbide was bought out by U.S. multinational Dow Chemical. The companies refused to clean up the spreading water contamination from the abandoned plant. Today, to mark this 25th anniversary of the Bhopal disaster, supporters around the world will be participating in an international day of action, including mass rallies, die-ins, candlelit vigils, protests, and more. I recently spoke with Bhopal chemical disaster activist Satinath Sarangi. Known as Satu, he is an engineer who arrived in Bhopal the day following the disaster and never left, founding a clinic to provide free care to survivors and becoming a key figure in the survivors' struggle for justice. He was recently in the United States for a 22-city tour for this 25th anniversary of the Bhopal disaster. His tour was called No More Bhopals. I began by asking him to talk about the Bhopal disaster.
25 years has passed, and yet justice has not been done in Bhopal, and yet even today there are people who are suffering and dying in Bhopal because of gas leak that happened more than 24 years before.
Satu, can you describe what happened 25 years ago on those nights, December 3rd, December 4th?
Yeah, on the night of 2nd by 3rd December 1984, there were over 27 tons of toxic gas leaked from this pesticide factory that was situated right next to where more than 200,000 people, poor people, lived. And this was a factory owned, designed, and operated by Union Carbide Corporation, USA. And during routine operations, water entered the tank, and because the safety systems were cut down or were very badly designed, and because the entire plant was under-designed, the water reacted with methyl isocyanate, which was stored in very high quantities. And there was a reaction which became a runaway reaction, so that there was no control. And as it is, safety systems were under-designed. They were also malfunctioning or under repair. And this gas leaked, and like a 30-feet high cloud, it covered about the entire city of Old Bhopal, more than 500,000 people. And there was no warning system in the factory. There was no one from the factory was telling people to run on the opposite direction of the wind and not in the direction of the wind as they did. And no one to tell them that they could actually protect themselves from the deadly impact of the gas by just holding a wet cloth or over their nose and mouth. So the people got to know only after they were surrounded by this cloud from all around, and they started running. And when they ran, as they ran, they inhaled more and more of this poisonous gas that sheared their lungs. And there was so much secretion of body fluids in their lungs that actually many people died because they drowned in their own body fluids. And then there were lots and lots of people who died because of the effect on the brain. Women were aborting as they ran. And it was by the next morning, there were thousands of people dead. Within the first 3 days, between 8,000 and 10,000 people died. And then in the subsequent years, more people died because of the damage that was caused to almost every organ in the body, because The poisons that people inhaled, they went into the bloodstream through their lungs and stayed there and damaged their lungs, their brain, liver, kidneys, and even more than 100,000 people still have chronic illnesses from that exposure. Next generation, we know, is marked by carbide's poisons. In addition, there are about 30,000 people who have been drinking contaminated groundwater from the factory because of the reckless dumping of hazardous waste. They are sick as well, and there is a high rise of birth defects in this population.
Why did you, who were not originally from Bhopal, didn't live in Bhopal, why did you go there?
Well, I heard on the radio about it, and I thought that I must do something, and I thought I would just go to Bhopal and maybe do a 1 week's relief work and then get back to my studies.
And what happened?
And once I went there, I saw this just too many people suffering too badly. And I also saw that many people had come to help, and so I joined them. And then none of us were thinking about how long we had been there, because help was so much needed. People were working day and night, and just trying to ease the pain that thousands and thousands and thousands of people were going through.
Talk about Union Carbide, what it did at the time of the spill, how you believe it happened, and then how the Indian government dealt with them and where they stand today.
Yeah. What is very clear from the internal documents of Union Carbide that we obtained through the discovery process in the U.S. federal court is that to start with, back in '73, when the proposal for the methyl isocyanate plant in Bhopal was approved by the Union Carbide Corporation's Danbury, Connecticut headquarters, they knew very well that to cut costs, they had sent untested technology, quote unquote. And this untested technology involved substandard construction material. It involved substantial design changes compared to its sister plant in Institute, West Virginia. And it was built in a way that its operating cost would be much lower. And it was also built in a way that they would just dump toxic waste on the surface, the Union Carbide's management already knew that a serious problem of contamination would occur. And yet this was sent to Bhopal. In 1980, it was made further unsafe because of the global cost-cutting that Union Carbide headquarters from Danbury, Connecticut directed, which meant that workers were cut down. It was cut down to about half, so that while safety training used to be 6 months, it was cut down to 15 days. And as a result of this cost-cutting, very soon the results were apparent, which was workers were hospitalized, they were injured, one worker died, and all this information was sent from the Bhopal office to Union Carbide's headquarters, but they took no note. What happened was Union Carbide Corporation sent a safety audit team of engineers from Charleston, West Virginia in 1982, and this team found that there were at least 30 spots where major hazard could occur in the Bhopal pesticide plant. And 11 of them were in the methyl isocyanate 7 unit, which is where the disaster occurred. But nothing was done about these hazard spots to remedy these, or the information was not even shared with the local management or the workers. And so this was a disaster waiting to occur. And Union Carbide knew that, and yet they went ahead with the cost cutting, and which included shutting down a refrigeration system that was meant to be kept, that was mandated to be kept there to keep the methyl isocyanates at sub-zero temperature. Instead, the refrigeration unit was cut down just to save something like $30 a day. And so all these deliberate design differences, the cutting down of safety systems, all this led to the disaster, which was very, very clear. And right after the disaster, Union Carbide took this position